Okay, that did a hell ring. Things like you heard on the decks. Glover hold the court and give the chief no suspect. Politics in the mix, like double Stuart Rich. Spinning tales from Black Wall Street, real life's the pitch. Donnie Glover Show, be more news. Donnie Glover Show, be more news.
Welcome to BeMoreNews.com, the news before the news, where we uncover the truth. How you doing, man?
Man, feeling well, man.
What's your name?
My name is Cardi Cornish.
And you a legend?
I'm a legend.
You're a legend here in Baltimore City. Where we at right now?
We live in the 17, Pennsylvania Avenue. The legendary Pennsylvania Avenue.
Man, the last time I saw you here, you were doing something just across the street here. What were you doing?
Oh, yeah, I had some food left over from an event. We brung it out. We fed a couple of people, man.
Why you do that?
Nice soul food.
Why you do that?
Man, the love that God has shown me in Christ, man, it overflows. That's how it overflows.
That's right.
We got more than we can use. We got more than we can handle ourselves. We try to let it flow. Let it flow to the next person.
Yeah. We're proud of you, man.
Thank you.
And we're proud of your son.
Thank you.
You're watching BeMoreNews.com, the news before the news, where we uncover the truth.
Business sticks hotter than lava. Got that Midas touch. Stocks and blocks teaching youngins how to clutch. Ears to the concrete, finger on the pulse, dropping wisdom like Hova. Each word a joke. Donnie Glover Show, be more news. 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 Walls painted black, history on lock. Blast off from Tulsa, rebirth like a clock. Markets rising from ashes to gains. Donnie the narrator, truth runs in veins. Donnie Glover Show, be more news. Donnie Glover Show, be more news. Donnie Glover Show, be more news. Donnie Glover Show, be more news.
First name's Donnie, last name's Glover. In it to win it for the long haul, baby. Good morning, world. Dayvon Love is a Baltimore-based political organizer and the director of public policy for Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle. You gotta love that name. A grassroots think tank that advances the public policy interests of Black people. In 2010, Love co-founded Leaders of a Beautiful Struggle, one of many organizations that successfully pressured the state of Maryland to disband its plans to build a juvenile jail downtown. LBS also had legislative efforts and advocacy efforts regarding criminal justice reform, youth, and community empowerment. Dayvon is also the author of Worse Than Trump, The American Plantation, a book that offers an important critique of the American political left and a political narrative to the exploitative relationship that Black people have to white institutions. Dayvon is also the author of When Baltimore Awakes, which is a comprehensive critique of the way white supremacy is embedded in the human social service sector in Baltimore. Let me just add that in America, a country with 5% of the world's population, we have 25% of those incarcerated. Here to discuss that and other issues pertaining to Black America, Dayvon Love. Good morning, sir.
Hey, man, it's a pleasure to be on with you.
How was your intro?
I mean, you did it real good, Donnie. You did it in typical Donnie Glover fashion. I appreciate it, bro.
Well, you wrote it. How important is writing? You know, congratulations on the 2 books. I did not know. How important is this thing right here?
You know, it's extremely important for a couple of reasons. One of the people that flashes on your intro is David Miller. And he actually was one of the people that told me when I was real young that writing was important, both in terms of being able to more effectively get my message out there. It was also important in terms of just documenting, like having, you know, actual documentation of perspectives that I think can get lost if you don't put it down. And I think more importantly for my current work, because I write a lot now in terms of like op-eds and stuff like that. And what I'm becoming clear about is that when you engage in political warfare, like having stuff down on the record in writing, it's an essential weapon in being able to engage the political landscape. So, it's been central.
Have we forgotten that as a people? I mean, you look at the Afro, you look at Be More News, it is difficult to find Black writers.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's a couple of things with that. I mean, one, I just think, America is generally an anti-intellectual society. And then you compound that with, I just think we're in a moment where people are less interested in rigorous thought and action. So I think that's just the thing. Like, people read less, and there's studies on that. I mean, and not even just our people, like just American society in general. I read something a few weeks ago where at Ivy League colleges, they're seeing that many of the students, the incoming students, many of them have never read a book longer than 200 pages. You know what I mean? So that's just the general thing. I think the other thing though is that unfortunately, and you probably know this better than me, for people to be able to get paid for a living to write is extremely difficult. The market for it has shrunk. So much has shifted to video and audio. So it's not nearly as much money. And luckily, I don't write as a way of how I feed myself primarily. You know what I mean? So I'm not in the situation I think some others would be, where if that's how you make a living, and then to do that with integrity. If you do it for a living and you're trying to do it with integrity, I imagine that plays a role in the diminishing number of Black people who are consistently writing.
One thing you and I have in common is an interest in the political realm.
Yes, sir.
City Hall, Annapolis, White House, United Nations.
Yes, sir.
How are we doing politically? Baltimore, Black people.
One of the things, and I got to give you props, Doni, for, I've been it has been important to me to develop not just like a trivia level history of Black Baltimore history, but it's been important to me to develop a deep knowledge of the political ideas and activities of historic Black Baltimore civic and political activity. It has provided me a tremendous roadmap and guide as to think about how to engage like larger political currents. And one of my general frustrations, and this is something that I think is a criticism of particularly my age bracket, is a lack of study, rigorous study, and commitment to rigorous study of that Baltimore Black movement history. And I think that in many ways is playing itself out now in our contemporary political landscape. I think there are certainly a number of Black folks that are in elected office that I think mean well, that I think, in many regards are doing good work. But I think on the question of Black people practicing self-determination, Black people practicing sovereignty as the basis for Black civic and political activity, which I believe was much stronger of an element of Black civic and political activity historically, I don't think is as central to the political landscape today. And so, for instance, one of the things that we see when we talk about like distribution of public resources to Black organizations and institutions, that's something that I think requires more advocacy, but something that I don't see as being made central as much as it needs to be. The importance of getting like major contracts to, Black people who are able to provide more opportunities for the masses of our community. I don't see enough attention paid to those kind of political endeavors, in spite of the fact that, again, I do think there are some Black folks that are in the political landscape today that are doing the best they can and doing what they know. But you asked me what I think the challenges are. I think that's one of them.
Did you ever have a chance to meet Marion Barry?
I did not. I know a lot of elders who worked with him and worked for him. He's an example, when I'm talking to people, one of the challenges I think we have is that not enough particularly Black folks in the political landscape, can understand and see our community as a source of power. Like, I think too many of our folks are interested in proximity to white corporate mainstream institutions. And to me, Marion Barry is an example of what it looks like when your political viability is based in the community's love and support. Like the fact that whatever race he ran, he's never going to lose. Just given his track record with the community, you know, regardless of all the kind of more sensational things that are made most known about him. I think Prince George's County is what it is today because of Marion Barry. Like, just the very potential for Black people to have access to that level of wealth is something that was Marion Barry, you know. And so it's a shame that that there isn't more made of like what he was able to do.
What about Maynard Jackson? Did he come across your desk?
Oh, absolutely. I think you know, one of the things that I think is most genius about what he was able to do was about the way that he coordinated, particularly with the airport, and coordinated Black folks being on some of these corporate boards, not just in terms of contract dollars, but in terms of putting Black people in positions of power in some of these corporate boards. I do think one of the things that would be important to emulate is a strategy of how we coordinate as a community as to who to put on some of these corporate boards as a part of a larger strategy, a larger militant political strategy, and pressing more resources in our community.
Oh my God, you said the word. You said the M word.
Yeah. I mean, you know, I'm fortunate that, you know, early on when we started LBS, people would say things to me like, you know, Dayvon, you have to tone all that Black stuff down. You know, that Black stuff is not, you know, you're not going to be able to be effective. You're going to eventually have to, quote unquote, grow up. And one of the things I'm most proud of is that I maintain this radical political sensibility, and been able to be effective. Like the track record of work, it demonstrates that this approach and methodology can be effective, again, if one is deeply studied and is committed with a level of integrity to our movement history.
All right, so I got to throw a Baltimore pop quiz at you.
Yes, sir.
You ready?
Yes, sir.
It's baseball season, so I got a mean curveball.
All right.
All right. Little Willie Adams.
Yes, sir.
How significant was he?
Oh, tremendously significant. You know, the ability for a brother who, as a numbers runner, to build a multi-million-dollar enterprise. And I think one of the things that's really important about his legacy is his it's very quiet financial contributions to a range of efforts that I think we're still, you know, feeling the impacts of today. I think about the fact, for instance, his wife, Victorine, right, the first Black woman to serve on the city council, and his contributions to the Colored Women's Democratic Club, which in a lot of ways, you know, Baltimore is one of the cities that has had like several Black women mayors, you know, more so than many other major cities. That in large part is attributable to Willie Adams' contribution to Victorine Adams, her political career, and the ability of that Women's Democratic Political Club. I mean, there's so many other things. I mean, you think about, he owns a lot of those buildings on Pennsylvania Avenue. You know, there's just so much. I think one thing I think is important to point out, it's a lesson that he learned that I think is important for us to learn, which is, because early on, he wasn't really super interested in politics, right? He was a businessman. He had no use for politics.
He thought.
That's right. And then when he started being targeted, in large part by many of his competitors who used politics to go after him, I think he then recognized the importance of politics. Even if you're not interested in all the bullshit that comes along with it, he understood the importance of being in that space meaningfully.
Because politics touches everything we do.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
People will say, I'm not political. Yes, you are.
Uh-huh.
You may not know that you are, but we are. Mm-hmm. Okay, all right. So you know Willie Adams. Do you know when segregation started in Baltimore?
Well, housing segregation was in many ways pioneered in Baltimore with that. So, George McMecken, who, lived in that block in West Baltimore, that was the basis for the zoning ordinance that the Supreme Court ruled was constitutional, that eventually got overwritten,
You
overturned.
mean like McMecken Street?
That's right, George McMecken, who was a Harvard graduate, who, came back to buy a house on that block in Baltimore.
A black man?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
Do you know his law partner's name?
McMecken, I don't.
It was his brother-in-law, Ashby Hawkins.
Ashby Hawkins, okay.
And in 1910, they took on then mayor, I almost said Martin O'Malley. Forgive me, Martin. I'm always throwing Martin under the bus. No, his name was J. Barry Mahou.
Mahou, that's right.
In 1910, he put forth an ordinance saying blacks couldn't move into white neighborhoods and whites couldn't move into black neighborhoods.
That's right.
Because of, do you know what incident spawned it?
I don't think so.
It was the construction of Roland Park.
That's right. The Roland Park Company.
A lot of us don't know that black people actually lived in Cross Keys in the early 1900s. And up in northeast in that area, there was Hose Heights. There was Wilson Park. And there was Morgan Park. Little communities in northeast Baltimore. Morgan Park featured a lot of Morgan professors. So we were in northeast deeper than we know, even in Cross Keys. As a matter of fact, they tried to get Grandison Hoe to sell his land, which is adjacent to Roland Park. They tried to get him to take some land in Cross Keys in exchange for it. That's how diabolically evil these racists who founded Roland Park really are. And then those practices were replicated around the country. Apartheid started right here in Baltimore.
Yes, sir.
But yeah, George McMecken was the hero, and we all should know his name, as well as Ashby Hawkins. And they were fighting, that was before the Goon Squad.
That's right.
All right, here's your bonus question.
Okay.
If you've really been paying attention now. Before Willie Adams, there was another man who ran numbers. He had Ladies of the Night. He had the largest black hotel in America, right here in Baltimore.
I'm not familiar with that one.
All right, well, we'll leave that for you. But he was the man before the man. Before Willie Adams, this cat was living in the 6600 block of Ricestown Road. Largest black hotelier in these United States, straight out of Baltimore. And he had a bar, and his hotel was right downtown.
I'm gonna check that out.
Okay.
I'm gonna check that out.
So let me ask you this. Are you a victim or a victor?
Oh, we are victors as a people.
Okay, so when we mention the word reparations, it's not, oh, me, oh, my, you robbed my ancestors, let me get a piece of the pie. That's not where you're coming from.
Not at all. Not at all. I would put it this way. The past 500 years of world history is defined by the project of European domination of the world, right? That's just a historical material fact. Prior to that, Black folks, people of African descent, and other indigenous people had high-level, well-functioning civilizations. And when we think about, human beings are social people, right? Which means that there's systems of human organization that are necessary for us to navigate civil society and live the high quality of life that we aspire to live. And so previous to that 500-year history, and during that 500-year history, there are moments when we were controlling the life-preserving institutions necessary for us to live our quality of life. Communications, water, food distribution, housing, medicine, all those things we had societies where we controlled and provided those things to our own community. And so reparations is about, as politically self-respecting people, reparations is about getting the investment that is due to us to invest in our capacity to be able to control the institutions that govern our lives. I think our current station in this society is a result of white supremacy, colonialism, imperialism, and all of that. And so reparations is about the capacity to invest in our capacity to be able to not just try to be included in American civilization, right? Which is, I think, the version of reparations that I think has been mainstreamed is a kind of a mainstream version of wanting more, Black people to be incorporated into the existing American social order. For me, reparations is we need investment in our capacity to navigate the society from a position of strength and power, right? And so, and again, I think as a politically self-respecting people, reparations is an essential demand if we are to, to have a station in the society that goes beyond our current one, which is our general reliance on institutions outside of our community for the things we need to survive.
What were you taught early on about Republicans?
Well, when you say early on, I mean, I didn't learn a whole lot about politics until I was an adult. I think, Republican.
What did you think of them before you got involved in politics? What had you heard?
I didn't hear or think much about them before I got involved in politics. I didn't come from a family where politics was a thing that was real present, so I want to know.
Well, if I can share with you, I remember in 90, what year was Reagan elected?
80.
80?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right after Jimmy Carter and Iran, the helicopter went down. Yeah, 80. The lottery number in Baltimore on a day that Ronald Wilson Reagan won, the lottery number was 666.
Okay. All right.
And that was an ominous number because in a matter of moments, the crack epidemic hit Baltimore and other cities across America. But I was living in West Baltimore, Baker and Moreland, and we watched our neighborhood disintegrate before our very eyes.
Yeah.
Iran Contra crack. They traded money, guns,
drugs.
And then and mind you, rap music is just coming on the scene.
Mm-hmm.
And what was pure and clean got bastardized. Now we got 50-year-old cats talking about I'm a thug.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I just got totally lost right there, Dayvon.
Yeah. No, I think
that's what I remember about them though.
Yeah. I mean, and now retroactively, when we look back at the history, we see that, the Southern strategy, which is a part of, Republicans, wanting to take back power after the civil rights and Black Power movement of the 60s and 70s, they weaponized the drug war against Black people in ways that, we're still feeling the effects of that. And it's interesting because I feel like there's a way that today Republicans try to distance themselves from their very political involvement. It was a part of their strategy politically to use the war on drugs against Black people. And then today, it's like they distance themselves and kind of moralize on the drug, issues in the Black community. When again, that was a part of their political strategy to try to destroy our political viability and power.
And they're even willing to throw their own under the bus in the process. Mm-hmm. And I'm making reference to the inordinate number of non-Blacks copying coke, dope, and rock in the Black community.
Mm-hmm.
Up and down the street all night long.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Living in abandoned miniums under the bridge. We've got more white addicts in Sandtown than I've seen in the rest of Baltimore combined. It is ridiculous.
No,
Now,
I believe it.
Black people were sitting on the steps in Bolton Hill. Best believe a police officer would come along and help them to get to some other destination. But we don't see that in West Baltimore.
Yeah.
Not since Freddie Gray and the consent decree. Were you a fan of the consent decree?
Not a huge fan. I think part of it is people understanding exactly what a consent decree is, right? I mean, a consent decree is an agreement between the federal government and a municipality or an agency to essentially saying we would sue you, we would take you to court, but instead we're going to condition these improvements or these changes in order to avoid any further court proceedings. So that's like structurally what a consent decree is. The limitations of a consent decree, though, is that law enforcement is the providence of state and local law, particularly in Maryland, the providence of state law. So there are limitations to what the federal government can do via consent decree, particularly as it relates to community oversight of law enforcement. So for me, I wasn't like opposed to the consent decree, but I do think that its importance and its continued conversation is overstated in that the best it can do is impose certain internal institutional practices to the Baltimore City Police Department, which isn't nothing. But to me, what is more significant and more important as it relates to police accountability is making it so that community can have oversight, be able to discipline and independent investigations of law enforcement. And those are not things the consent decree can mandate. Those things require state level action.
Well, I don't know about all of that fancy stuff you just said, Dayvon. What I do know is the police stopped getting out the car at Pennsylvania and Lawrence. The police are parked on one side with the lights swirling, and the people are across the street. And as long as you don't shoot nobody, you essentially can sell all the dope in the world. That's what I've seen. I've seen the police take a knee, and unless you're shooting, it's like hands off. Whereby the Avenue Market, whereby Penn North have become open air drug markets. And then you pull in the political realm. Well, why in a majority black city with majority black elected officials, why isn't some attention being paid to Penn North? Well, I got to give Senator Hayes his props. But from a local standpoint, Penn North, from what I've seen, has been a protest by the police against the consent decree because they just allowed it to fester. Like, as long as you don't shoot nobody, as long as you don't give out no fentanyl laced with antifreeze, we don't give a sniff all the dope, sell all the dope you want. That's what I see. Am I wrong?
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong. Let me add some things to that. One of the things that I've been an advocate for is community-based, black-led grassroots violence prevention. So I'm sure you're familiar with We Are SNM, right? Baltimore Peace Team, Baltimore Peace Movement. And what I'm clear about is that as those programs have become more successful, I think law enforcement feels that the success of those programs would in some ways jeopardize the industry of law enforcement, right? Because it's important for people to know law enforcement in many respects is an industry that's a racket. There are a bunch of people who from outside of our community primarily who benefit from the opportunities in law enforcement. And I think that investment in black-led grassroots violence prevention organizations where people other from the community can go and, tell people to move along or get people treatment or get people help. And I think law enforcement is being spiteful institutionally, being
damn right
to say, okay, then we're not going to do anything.
Yeah, so go home, give up your badge and go home. Go back to Cecil County, Pennsylvania. Go back there.
That's right, Delaware.
Yeah, go back. We don't need you.
That's right. That's right. And I think it's important to put on Front Street that angle of it because, and one of the things that I noticed was that perspective from law enforcement was something that they've generally been quiet about. But one of the things that I noticed in Sinclair Broadcasting's media and Fox 45 and now with the Baltimore Sun with David Smith being majority owner of that, what I'm noticing is that
and Armstrong Williams,
the attacks on these community-based violence prevention efforts, to me, make it very crystal clear what their agenda is, which is to diminish the credibility of that work so that law enforcement becomes like the central public safety force. And what we're seeing over the past few years is that that actually isn't the best way to approach safety. You know what I'm saying? I think law enforcement feels threatened by that. And I think to your point, part of their reaction is, all right, we're just not going to do nothing. And I think that's unacceptable.
Go home. Don't show up at Penn North saying, oh, we've had more overdoses. Didn't you have a week to get this dope off the streets?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
So
right.
That shows me that law enforcement do not own the streets. They may share ownership of the streets, but if somebody put out a bad package, they defied the streets and they defied the police.
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir.
Because you already know this product is lethal. And it seems to me that this second round of deaths, the charges for anyone who distributed the second round should be doubly severe.
Mm-hmm.
Because now you knowingly put that bad dope back on the streets.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I will say I've seen the city respond, but I will say y'all like years late.
Yeah.
You can't let a big sore fester on your arm, your leg, and say, oh, it'll get better.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Unless you treat it, it's going to get worse. And eventually they're going to cut it off.
Mm-hmm.
Do you see Penn North a part of this new Baltimore, a part of this new West North Avenue imagined by Senator Hayes?
Yeah, I think it's going to take a lot of work. And I do think that there needs to be more creative, community-based, and intentional approaches to deal with the issue of addiction. You know, one of the things that does not get talked about, and in some ways people chafe at, as Black people, the level of societal pain that our community has dealt with, and the fact that in many respects people resorting to controlled substances are rational responses to the conditions that our community faces. And that unfortunately, many of the interventions that are often provided don't deal with that fundamental fact. They don't deal with it.
Let's go back. I don't want to miss it. And the fundamental fact that drugs is a commodity in the community, the drug business.
Well, what I'm saying is that there's an enormous amount of pain that our community has experienced as a result of societal forces of denigration.
Yes, trauma.
You know what I'm saying
trauma.
And that there's a way that I feel like that there hasn't been enough understanding of a comprehensive approach to the problem that deals specifically with the nature of the pain. Because I think there's all this conversation about trauma generally, you know what I'm saying? But we're talking about like spiritual, existential, pain that our people feel. And the industries that are funded and tasked with addressing addiction don't address themselves to that aspect of our experience as a community. So the interventions that they develop are
sterile.
They're sterile, they're reactionary, right? You got to overdose and then they give you Narcan, right? So it's really a matter of what are the comprehensive ways to address our community's pain, right? And not just trauma in general, but particular ways that we experience, really deep pain. One thing I share, this is something I typically don't share, but one thing I'll share with you is, my father struggled with addiction. His mother was killed by one of his siblings who was having a mental episode, right? Has, really extreme, mental issues, right? Which resulted in a very brutal killing. And so when I think about like issues that I've had with him over the years, there's a way that even understanding my own issues, the level of pain that comes from that kind of experience of like walking in and seeing the remnants of his mother, right? Like being brutally murdered in that way. In some ways, it's like who he became. It don't make sense that he would be anything else than what he ultimately became. You know what I'm saying? And so I think, unfortunately, many of the interventions don't address themselves to the level of the pain that was systematic in our community.
I got one similar to that. Vietnam.
Absolutely. That's right.
This is 2025. Eric March. I'm sure you know Mr. March.
Yes, sir.
He came on a couple of months ago noting the 50th year for a lot of Vietnam veterans, 50 years since 1975. I had a conversation with my 5th and 6th grade teacher a couple of days ago. When he was our teacher back in 75, I'm just learning he just came home from Vietnam. They didn't have the word PTSD.
That's right.
As it is all over the place now. And they were exposed to the poppy seed.
That's right.
And if you think about it, that's when we started shooting dope.
That's right.
Our soldiers that picked up the habit overseas. Not saying that's the only avenue to addiction, but a lot of them soldiers picked up habits in Vietnam and came home.
That's right.
And had to find it somewhere else. And Baltimore, I don't know if I imagine you know, is a heroin town.
That's right.
You were disappointed that the governor vetoed reparations.
Very much. Very much.
Wow.
So a couple of things. It's my practice, given that I do legislative advocacy and I've done it for a number of years. I have a pretty standard practice of meeting with the speaker, their chief of staff, the Senate president, their chief of staff, and now with West's governor, Democratic governor. I met both in the summer of 23 and 24 with his staff. And in both years, we've expressed to them reparations was something that's important to us, right? It's something that we've been advocating for and something that we're pushing for. And so we worked with the Legislative Black Caucus in crafting the bill that would establish a commission to both study historic harms and to, more importantly, provide recommendations as to how Maryland would operationalize a reparations policy. And so
Dayvon, that's like I meet this girl, and before we go on a date, I let her know up front.
That's right.
I don't mess with people from South Baltimore. I'm letting you know that now. I don't get down like that anywhere else, but not that. I done told you to lay the ground rules.
That's right.
The boundaries. Okay.
That's right.
If they choose to go on a date after that.
That's right.
If you catch me in South Baltimore, it's a trigger finger. Don't play goofy like you don't know what's what. I told you.
Yes, sir.
But they ain't listening. Come on, Dayvon.
So, we work with the Black Caucus. And, as you know, the session's January to April. And so towards the middle or end of February, I start hearing that the governor is making calls to try to kill the bill. And I had a good enough relationship that, we met with his staff, 23 and 24. So I have a call with his legislative director who explains to me, their reason, their hesitancy in terms of reparations and wanting to go another direction. And part of what I said to his leadership team at the time was that it is my perspective that the hesitancy is about appealing to a white political mainstream, And I said, no, y'all not saying it, and I know y'all going to dispute it, but I said to them, I'm telling you that that's what I think, and that's what I'm going to say, right? So I was very clear and transparent with them about that. And so when the bill, now I was clear that he was making calls to try to kill the legislation. When the legislation ultimately passed, it was my hope that the governor would just work with those of us that have been a part of pushing it to figure out what, to how to do it in a way that would be favorable, something that he would be interested in. And actually met with him the day before he vetoed the bill, where I tried to express to him, like, as a person that like works in the legislative landscape, because a part of his conversation, I'm sure you remember the op-ed that was written by Larry Gibson in the Baltimore Banner, that basically saying we don't need another study, we just need action. So he's essentially echoing that same line of argumentation. And what I said to him, I said, having a study commissioned by the state of Maryland that outlines how to implement a reparations policy, it's helpful in navigating the legislature. And I know that there are examples where task forces are created to kill something, to drive it into the ground. But there are also examples where commissions have been stood up that have resulted in policy change. And I am saying, as a person that's done legislative advocacy, and it's specifically as it relates to allocation of resources, that these kinds of commissions can be helpful. He remained committed to his position. So now he, at the time, he said he hadn't made up his mind, but I suspected that he had already decided that he was going to veto the bill. And so one, I'm disappointed, just given all of the communication leading up to it, right? I was, and I will say that he did express some contrition about the communication, like particularly with me, like not having had a conversation with me that he was having with some of the legislators. So he expressed that. But so the first, kind of source of the disappointment was just the fact that we had been working on this, we had talked about it, and then the fact that we get to in the middle of session and there's a conversation about vetoing, that's one part of what was disappointing. Secondly, what to me exacerbated my disappointment was the message that came from his veto letter. The message about him saying he's done with studies, there's been a bunch of studies, and it's time to just act. Because I think one of the things that I find problematic about that framing is that in some ways it insinuates that those of us that were advocates for this bill ourselves are not engaged in work to repair the harms done in our community, right? As opposed to the fact that you can do both. And more importantly, and this is to me one of the most important things about people discussing this issue of the bill, the veto, and all of that. There is no study that the state of Maryland has commissioned that outlines a proposal as to how to implement a reparations policy in Maryland. There is no such study. So when the governor says there's all this scholarship on the issue, there is a lot of scholarship on the issue generally of reparations, generally of the harms that have been done in terms of white supremacist violence against Black people. There is generally scholarship on the question. There is no such study commissioned by the state of Maryland as to how to implement a reparations policy. And to me, that would be helpful. And we can do things while the study happens, but it would be helpful to have a comprehensive document that says, here's how we can do reparations, as opposed to, oh, I'm gonna go do this, you're gonna go do that, right? Like it to me, it doesn't create a sound basis for policy action when you don't have such a document that would help guide legislators as to how to implement a reparations policy. So that was actually really disappointing, is to kind of hear the study versus action thing insinuating that those of us engaged in supporting the bill. And like one of the things that LBS already worked on before he came into office, when in legalization of recreational cannabis, we helped to wrote the language for the Community Repair and Reinvestment Fund. So 35% of revenues from recreational cannabis goes into a fund that comes back to the communities impacted by the war on drugs. And we're currently involved in supporting the implementation of that. So in terms of repairs, like we're doing that work. This commission would help to aid with that. And I just found the study action dichotomy, again, as not in touch with the reality of the work that people are doing who supported the bill.
And I don't want to stay over here, but I gotta ask you, for the record, given all of the cannabis that black people buy, smoke, eat, what have you, how many black-owned dispensaries do we have in this 30% black state with the only black governor?
Well, so a couple things. One, I don't know the number, but I know that it's not 30%.
I understand it's one in the entire state of Maryland and Prince George's County.
Yeah, and I'm thinking about like the dispensaries and this the distribution. I think that that's its own complex question. Part of why we wanted to establish a community repair reinvestment fund is because we were clear about the difficulties of having black folks who own at the highest level of the industry at that level, because it's very capital intensive. So for us, if we have tax revenues that come as a result of that, then there can be investments in our community that's not reliant on participation in the industry. Now, we should continue to try to push for more access.
And they can break it down because they got like a $10 million threshold.
Right. And that's part of the challenge is...
That's how you keep poor people out.
Well, part of the challenge is that actually running a dispensary is extremely capital intensive.
Oh,
it's not one of those things that one could arbitrarily like decrease the threshold. And so that now there are interventions the state could do in terms of like race specific investments and remedies that I think part of the angst, and I think a legitimate angst, though I would disagree and I would go in this direction, is the kind of the Supreme Court regime around race-based language. Like in many ways, that would be the most direct way to circumvent the threshold that it takes for a black company to operate at that level. That part is tricky, and again, that's why we focus on the tax revenues, because in spite of whatever happens with those that are owners of dispensaries at the highest level of the industry, black people should be getting money regardless whether or not we are owners of dispensaries or not. So I mentioned that work to say that in terms of the work to repair, folks like us and others have already been doing that work. So it's not something that, Reparations Commission means we stop acting. We're going to continue to do the work of addressing racism and white supremacy and how to implement a reparations policy. It's just important to have a document to help support that work. And again, I was just disappointed of the way that the governor pitted the notion of this commission against actions concretely in the direction of repairing.
Do you think it'll come back around to bite him in the rear end?
I don't know. I'm actually kind of surprised at what I think was the sloppiness as to how politically this was dealt with by him and his team. And what I mean by that is, like, if you were going to veto the bill, I imagine that would be like a communication strategy and conversation that you would have had with people who you know. And again, I have a relationship with Wes, like before he was governor. And for me, it's something where I'm okay if let's say he actually just doesn't believe in the concept of reparations. That's all right. Everybody doesn't think the same. We can have a discussion about where we stand, and then you stake your position and I'll stake mine. And I think that's one of the things that I think has been missing from the conversation, because I'm actually not sure about the governor's actual perspective on reparations, like the historic traditions of advocacy for reparations, the various forms that it's taken, the various actions that have been taken, by movements to HR 40. There are a variety of things that I don't know his specific perspective on reparations.
Well, let me tell you what the streets say. The streets say if he wants to be president, then he better stay far away from the R word.
And that's what I think as well. I have been told by him directly and others that is not something that is playing into his calculation. I don't believe that. And I said to him directly that even if it's not something that he himself is pursuing, there are people around him who have an interest in him staying away from the political and historical connotation that comes with reparations. I think that is probably central, central to the reason to veto the bill.
Does it have a negative light on him being the only black governor in the country? Do you think people around the country who support reparations in Texas, in California, in Alabama, do you think they are now looking at you, me, Dr. Ray Winbush, and say, I don't know about this guy?
Well, I mean, I think so. A few things. I think people are upset around the country. Like, I think reparations advocates are upset because they figure why, he was supported. The other thing that I don't think is talked about enough is the wide-ranging political impact. Right, him being the lone black governor means that other reparations efforts around the country, people are going to be more gun shy. And I've actually heard people who are advocating on the national level. I've heard that they had reparations proposals that now that white elected officials that had agreed to support it have been like, if the governor of Maryland is not with a black governor, right? Then so there are ways that the veto has done damage to the reparations movement nationally, right? That I think is important to consider as we think about the importance, especially, the work that I'm engaged in is working to pressure legislators to vote to override the veto, right? Because I think that'll send a message to the rest of the country that while the governor vetoed it, it is still something that was so important in Maryland that the initiative, that the bill moved regardless of the governor's veto.
Who's your favorite president?
I don't have no favorite president.
It's not Barack Obama?
No. America's an empire. It's imperialist. It's, it's a blight on the world. Produces the miseries of billions of people around the world.
Well, a lot of people see Wes Moore as Obama-esque.
I think so. I actually wrote an op-ed in Afro where I make the comparison between him and Barack Obama. I think part of the challenge is that I think our community, when Barack Obama came along, I think our community just was excited about having a black person as president. And I think our community is less excited about that and more interested in what you're going to deliver for black people. And so I think that's going to be the measuring stick that should be the measuring stick as to whether or not a person is viable for higher office. But yeah, I mean, everybody I talk to, I think it's clear that there's a trajectory for him. I think the Democratic Party itself actually has an interest in Wes Moore being a viable candidate for president in 2028. And unfortunately, I think it impacts the politics of our state negatively, even beyond just him and his own political, whatever his ambitions are, the people around him. Just that very dynamic, I think, impacts the politics of Maryland negatively, because then every political decision becomes about whether or not it's going to make him look bad.
We got 7 minutes, and I got 2 questions for you.
Yes, sir.
Now, you notice I come on with my typical Western gear.
Yes, sir.
And I notice you have some cultural items from the continent.
Yes, sir.
So that means you have some type of connection to the motherland. And for kicks and giggles, I'll call it Al-Kebulon today, or Ethiopia. We know the motherland has been renamed by people who have gone and had a taste of it.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of the continent,
mm-hmm.
we're talking about a black president, and I ain't finished with Obama.
Mm-hmm.
But from an Afrocentric perspective, what was the significance of Africa losing Muammar Gaddafi?
Oh man, huge. Muammar Gaddafi is a complicated figure politically, but his initiatives around investing in African nations' capacity for things like irrigation and agriculture, his desire to establish a satellite that Black people would control, his desire to develop a Pan-African currency, and having oil reserves such that he had the wealth to execute on some of those things. I actually think one of the worst things that Barack Obama did was the assassination of Muammar Gaddafi, because there were political possibilities for Black people to practice self-determination that Gaddafi was central for, that Obama essentially took away. I mean, you could do a whole show on that. I think the consequences of that are tremendously negative for Black people globally, and not enough conversation is had about that.
You get an A+, 2 stars.
Yes,
Now here's your bonus question.
Yes, sir.
The baddest man in Africa today.
Traore, Ibrahim Traore of Burkina Faso. And I think it's one of those, like, we actually just did a podcast that'll come out in a few months that talks about the Sahel states and what they're doing in West Africa. And my hope is that more of our people can observe, like pay attention to what they're doing in West Africa, because there are lessons that we should learn and should try to cooperate, because the United States has an interest in quelling, which Traore is doing in Burkina Faso. We need to take advantage of the opportunities as Black people globally with what they're doing there.
Anything you want to say? I'm gonna give you the screen. You didn't earn the screen. Tell them what you want to tell
them. Well, look, as we talked about for this reparations bill, one of the biggest things we're going to be working on is trying to override the veto. It's really important, and the overriding of the veto is of central importance in terms of maintaining the ability of the masses of our people to really impose our political will. And so I think it's clear the reason reparations even came to a head in the legislature is because there was such a demand from Black people in Maryland. You know, the polls that have been done is like 8 out of 10 Black Marylanders support reparations. So this is something that is a mandate that comes from our community. And so in many respects, like, this veto override is not just about overriding a study bill, which I think some people would chalk it up to, but in many ways it's a contestation of political wills. Right. And that we have to pressure, you know, those watching this show that are going to see this later. I think it's going to be extremely important to pressure your elected official to support the override. I'm sure the governor and his people are making calls to try to diminish and to undermine the veto override. Like, I'm sure that's happened. That's a part of politics. And that would make sense. He wants to support the decision he made. It's going to be extremely important, and not to take for granted the pressure that needs to be put on elected officials, particularly our Black ones, to ensure that they stand strong in voting to override the veto, so that Maryland can continue to be on the track. Because Maryland has done amazing things and steps towards the question of reparations. And this override is an important opportunity for Maryland to lead even more on the important question of reparations, the groundbreaking work that I think Maryland is poised to do with reparations. So, you know, I just wanted to use my time to tell all your listeners, tell all your elected officials, don't be scared, don't stand down, vote to override the veto.
Dayvon, you and I have publicly disagreed with the dean of politics on this matter, Larry Gibson. I know you got a phone call.
Well, I don't have that kind of relationship with him. Like, it's a respectful, cordial relationship.
Then you got an email.
No.
Mm-mm.
And I'd be interested in a conversation, but, you know, so we don't have that kind of relationship. I respect him and respect the work that he's done. But yeah, I just think he's wrong about this. He represents the traditional civil rights wing of our movement history that on these issues tends to be fairly conservative.
The Koreans, no, Japanese, the Jews, the Jewish people, the Native Americans, including the Black Native Americans, because a lot of us are confused. We don't realize we were already here long before Columbus showed up.
That's right.
Everybody else got paid, so we're not supposed to get paid.
There it is. There it is.
Do you think this affects Wes's reelection?
Maybe. I mean, I know a part of what I'm gearing up to do is to ask Black voters to take in consideration this veto override. We got to condition our vote on some things. And I think this I think means that we have to put some things on the table in exchange for our support. It shouldn't just be assumed that we're going to support them.
Do you think anyone will stand up? I mean, I see Delegate Jocelyn Pena Melnick has no problem standing up. I see that other, and you know, I gotta say a word for, what's her name? Alethea McCaskill.
That's right.
Because I remember when she first came on the scene, she was swinging on Aunt Shirley, and you know, we weren't gonna have any of that, but she has evolved and emerged as a force. And I think Shirley would be proud of her stance, especially being from Jamaica. Wagwan.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
And I think of Nanny the Maroon Queen. I think of Harriet Tubman. Can we say, you know, when I think about what you have said today, and then what I typically agree with, it's almost like we can't say Barack Obama and Harriet Tubman in the same sentence.
I mean, as far as I'm concerned, they different traditions. Barack Obama doesn't come from the radical Black tradition of freedom. Like that's just not. I mean, even his own words. Like, I mean, you read his own books. That's not who he is. And I think as a community, sometimes we want to project some of that onto people because they occupy a position. But that's not who Barack Obama is, and that's not who Wes Moore is. Wes Moore doesn't emerge from a Black radical movement tradition, and that's not a knock. That's just not what produced him, right? So in many ways, I don't expect him to carry the perspective of a Black Liberation Army, of a Republic of New Africa, of a Universal Negro Improvement Association, of a Organization of African American Unity. I don't expect him to carry that perspective. These are different traditions.
You can't fake that either.
Yes, sir.
It's like North Avenue. You can't walk down North Avenue if you don't know. Because you won't. You'd be too scared.
That's right.
Dayvon, let me just say publicly, I'm very proud of you.
Yeah, that means a lot. That means a lot. And over the years, just watch you over the years, your mentorship, and I'm saying, I'm glad to say that publicly, particularly the Baltimore stuff, like just the importance of learning. Like I know all the broader history, but the importance of knowing Baltimore's movement history. And you've been really instrumental in me getting that information. And some of the stuff you said today, I'm gonna look up and get hip to. So
Tom Smith.
Tom Smith. Yes, sir.
How can people follow you, catch up with you, contact you?
LBSbaltimore.com, LBS Baltimore, and all your relevant social media.
I'm very proud of you and Adam, and don't stop doing what you're doing, and don't forget that ink pen.
Yes, sir. Appreciate that.
It's mightier than the sword. Donald Trump is not a guy who volunteered to go to Vietnam, but Donald Trump has an ink pen that can send 500,000 people to war.
Yes, sir.
That pen is powerful.
Yes, sir. Appreciate that, Donnie.
Yes, sir.
All right, man.
Yes, sir. Good morning, world.